There's no way I could begin a review about Star Fox Zero without talking about its most popular predecessor, Star Fox 64. This N64 title went on to become the second best-selling game for the system and was universally acclaimed by almost all critics during its release. Nowadays, the majority of fans view 64 as dated but still fun. Personally, I had a lot of fun with Star Fox 64. It's certainly not perfect, but the multiplayer was simple and addictive, the corny story was entertaining, the bad voice acting was charming, and the gameplay was really enjoyable. Shooting lasers at robots and monkeys in a spaceship is dumb fun, and for all those reasons, that's why Star Fox 64 works so well. On the other hand, this is why Star Fox Adventures, Star Fox Command, and to a minor degree, Star Fox Assault didn't work all that well as sequels. Star Fox Adventures was not the typical on-rails Star Fox game, but instead was a lackluster, mediocre Ocarina of Time clone. Think what you want about Star Fox Adventures, but watching my friend Exo Paradigm Gamer play it lately has made me realize that this game is not good by its own merits for what it's trying to do. Star Fox Assault was actually a great game with a good blend of on-rail shooting in the R-Wing and ground combat. The multiplayer in Assault was a lot of fun, and although reception is mixed, I liked Assault a lot more than most people. Star Fox Command was, like Adventures, a decent but flawed sequel that, while trying to retain the gameplay of the original, was plagued with technical issues and limitations. Now, I'm sure many of you would disagree with my evaluation of those games, and that's okay. It's not like we all have to be a hive mind and agree on everything. The same rings true for Star Fox Zero. See, many people have been lauding Zero as the savior of the series, saying it will make Star Fox great again, and saying that the controls might be the only thing wrong with this game because it has to be good. It has to be. It's Star Fox on the Nintendo Wii U. How could a Wii U game made by Nintendo and Platinum Games be anything less than good? Well, how about we begin with a discussion of the story in Star Fox Zero. The first thing that you should know about Zero is that it relies heavily on nostalgia and wanting the player to feel it at all steps of the way. Zero is very aware that it is a Star Fox game that many people have been anticipating for years, and it capitalizes on that. However, that isn't necessarily a good thing. It's like the developers took everything on the outside people liked about 64 and just copied it into Zero. You got the iconic barrel roll lines, the boxes of the characters giving commentaries of what's happening, and the classic level themes. But in the process, the developers forgot one thing: the original's charm. These deliberate choices to make Zero more like 64 are not endearing, they're grating. Decisions to make the voice acting phoned in and the pacing of the conversations awkward because that's how the original was are frankly awful ones. The N64 had to have limited voice acting, animations, and such because of the hardware and time period, but Zero just does it to invoke nostalgia, and it doesn't work. Why can't Zero have synced lip movement to what characters are saying? Well, it wasn't in the original, so stylistically we can't, and it will not work in the Star Fox sequel. Why can't we pace the lines of dialogue so they sound like characters are having actual conversations and are not reading off a script in a conference room? Well, in the original they were awkward and people liked them, so we obviously had to lazily scrap lines together. Is this what fans want? An homage that tries to be identical to its source material? Am I expecting too much out of a modern game to have competent facial animations and likable characters in the game to actually be in the world they're set in? Star Fox Zero just lacks soul. The story, which I'll get into a bit, is so dull and uninteresting that you don't feel compelled to carry on and defeat Andross. Blasting enemies in a spaceship should feel epic and have a purpose. purpose, but there isn't one. You fight for the sake of fighting, and while that works in many other cases, it doesn't in Zero. Zero tries its best to set up this galactic war which pits you against Andross and his army. In this reboot of something that didn't need a reboot, Andross is threatening to take over the galaxy, and you, with your crew of Peppy, Slippy, and Falco, must stop him. Remember, he's especially evil because Fox's dad, James McCloud, died against Andross. Despite this, Andross doesn't really seem evil, and nothing is really at stake, so I don't feel motivated to want to defeat him and his forces. When I play a game that tries to have a story, I want to feel engrossed in the story and feel like what I'm doing has some weight. With Zero, I don't feel immersed in this galaxy. I feel like I'm going through the motions like a slow flowing river that abruptly stops at the end. What might have been more interesting is if you actually began as James McCloud and were put up against an invincible army with Pigma betraying you at the end of the level, and you, as the player, sacrificing yourself for the good of the team. This would have given the player a clear motive: revenge. Fox attempting to avenge his father's death as the main focus of the plot would have been a lot more dynamic than the standard save the world plot. Not to mention, this would have made the characters a lot more interesting. There's one part of the game where Peppy gets shot down by Starwolf. Hold on, Starwolf is in this game? Yeah, I remember Wolf and his team in 64 and Assault. They were so tough, haha, nostalgia. Again, this is another stab at nostalgia, but it somehow works. Even though they come out of nowhere and aren't introduced all that well, their fights are really cool. Near the end, you fight Starwolf one last time by yourself, and it's a nice challenge in an otherwise easy game. Like I was saying before, Peppy gets shot down by Starwolf and careens into some desert planet, and you would expect yourself to care about Peppy's well-being during the time, but for some weird reason, I, nor any of the Star Fox crew, seem to give a single fuck about Peppy. There is no dire need to rescue him, no pressure, no tension, nothing. There are arbitrary reasons to care, like the fact that you should care automatically because Peppy is Peppy from Star Fox 64, and if he's harmed, that's no good! If there's one good thing to come out of the story, it's that you can skip through the entirety of it with ease and still be able to just romp through the game. You don't need to follow the story to play Star Fox Zero, but the fact that it is more story-centric and very drab is a problem. All of these issues do end up stifling an otherwise thrilling, confusing, but cool ending. I'm not allowed to show it even with a spoiler section due to these FTC guidelines, but that doesn't mean I can't tell you what I thought of it. Without spoiling it, the intro to the end is very confusing and the final boss is okay. So now that we have all that out of the way, let's move on to the presentation, which a lot of people have been complaining about. I won't lie, the trailers do a poor job of showing how decent Star Fox Zero actually looks in game. It's not as bad as everybody says it looks, honestly. While the textures are not as detailed as something like Pikmin 3 or Bayonetta 2, they aren't so jarring that they ruin the visuals of Zero. Some environments like the snow level, the desert level, and this asteroid level look visually unique, and the fact that there is visual variety in Zero is pretty great. Sure, you do go back to Corneria at a different time at one point, which is quite lazy, but other than that, every stage is distinct. That being said, no area is that memorable like Corneria was in 64. After a bit, every stage just blends together. Nothing stood out as stellar. The models for enemies in R-Wings are equally as alright. You can't really mess up designing R-Wings, Landmasters, or the new gyrocopter, and the developers certainly nailed their designs. Even the way first person looks on the gamepad is kinda neat. Enemy designs are a little on the bland side though, as there is little variation to them. The same enemy models are reused quite a bit in Zero, even though you travel to numerous different planets with different climates. I mean, the fact that the enemy vehicles are the same does make sense in the context of this huge galactic war, but more variety would have been appreciated. As for the soundtrack, it's fantastic. This is easily the best part of Star Fox Zero, and also something that heavy inspiration from 64 attribute shines in. The remix, especially Star Wolf's, Corneria's, and Star Fox's, are beautifully composed. Every track is energetic and exciting, which makes the gameplay seem more fast-paced. The orchestra sounds are a nice change from Star Fox 64, and I'm glad electronica tracks akin to 64 are used sparingly. The music pays homage to 64, but it's also its own thing. It's a perfect balance of nostalgic charm and newness. And finally, we come to easily the most important part of Star Fox Zero, the gameplay, which is essentially divided into 3 segments. The first and most prominent are the R-Wing and Walker sections. These are your standard method of combat, with you taking control of a spaceship and pressing the A button to gun down any enemy you see. By holding the A button, you can also charge a ball of energy which can lock onto enemies and create a mini explosion on contact. The R-Wing can also pick up and fire bombs, which is yet another way to destroy enemies. These methods of murdering your foes are a competent way of making the combat bombastic and enjoyable. There's nothing wrong with the way you can kill enemies, but movement is a different story. With the R-Wing, you can choose to move your reticle with the gamepad while you move your ship with the analog stick. This is extremely awkward to control, but fortunately you can change this to have your gamepad screen have first person and use gyro controls to precisely fire your shots. It's useful when you're in a cutscene and still have control of your ship, so you can use the gamepad to keep firing away. Plus, some foes like these drones require somewhat accurate aim, so this function of the gamepad does come in handy. That being said, it does take a bit to get used to this control scheme if you're used to how 64 plays. The controls are not bad, they're just different for the R-Wing. The Walker mode, lifted right out of Star Fox 2, is a different story. This can be accessed a little later in the game, with you pressing in one of the analog sticks to transform the R-Wing. Think of this mode like those ground combat sections in Assault, except you can hover, dash really fast, and only have one method of attack, the same one the R-Wing has. The Walker functions almost the same way the R-Wing does, which makes transformation more streamlined and straightforward. Like the R-Wing 2, the controls hinder how much fun the Walker could be, as it's very difficult to aim, not to mention claustrophobic in tight spaces. Especially with the final boss, this is a huge problem that could have easily been fixed by making the areas larger or eliminating motion controls altogether. Overall, the R-Wing is fun to play as, but, and there's always a but, I wish the level design could have been more interesting or creative. Most levels are linear slogs to the end, which almost always end in an all-range boss fight. Some more variety or non-linearity would have been nice. For example, a level could open up with a boss fight and end with an exciting chase sequence. Having all the levels have the same structure lessens their impact and excitement when you know what's coming in every stage. By the same token, levels and enemy placement are so simple that it makes Zero a breeze to complete. The only times I died in Zero were when the camera screwed me over, like in the last fight, or when I wasn't paying attention. You would expect the boss fights to cause a lot of those deaths, but they usually did not. Most fights are very, very easy and poorly designed. Star Wolf can be defeated by spamming the shoot button with the gamepad's precision aiming, and the same goes for this ape boss. There were 2 fights that did give me trouble, but that was because of how terribly designed they were. So there's this spider-looking boss in the snow level, and it's so hard to beat because, coupled with the unresponsive and clunky motion controls, there are enemies everywhere just waiting to kill you. And when you eventually destroy the pylons on top and attack its central spot, after you're done wailing on it, it can flop on top of you. The only way to avoid him is to fly away, but since the boss is so fucking large, it can and will trap you. One time I got hit by the boss's crushing attack and it glitched me out to the point of death. Then there's this rectangular boss fight, which involves lasers coming out of this spaceship in all 4 directions. The issue here is that you can only attack the boss when he's lasering, and more often than not, when his weak spot is exposed, the camera won't let me move to attack it. It's not hard to beat these bosses, but they are designed designed in the most frustrating ways. I just wish Star Fox Zero was more challenging. There are incentives to get a high score, but it's hard to care about getting the high score when you're just going through the motions. I guess you could argue that there are medals that unlock stuff to collect, but once again, you don't feel compelled to collect medals in Zero. Granted, there's not really a reason to do it in 64 either. Some people just like the score attack aspect of Star Fox, I suppose, and I'm not one of them. The other section of Star Fox Zero are the Landmaster segments, which are okay. Moving and aiming are somewhat clunky, but I guess they are tolerable. Landmaster levels are ground-based, which is a nice change of pace. Plus, the Landmaster can roll around, hover, and change into a flying hybrid of the R-Wing, which adds some versatility to the vehicle, unlike how it was in 64. I'm sure some fans might be peeved by this design choice, but I like it. Apart from the level design not being too terribly interesting, the Landmaster segments are okay. But the last vehicle in this game is by far the absolute worst. It is none other than the new gyrocopter, which I hated playing with. You take control of a helicopter, which in and of itself is an okay idea, but then you realize you also have this robot, which is the whole gimmick of these sections. The gyrocopter segments require you to deploy this robot 50% of the time and press a button to hack some object and disable it. It's so simple that it gets really annoying. It's cool when you have to hack the gorilla in the beginning, but the novelty quickly wears out in the covert base mission. Flying around in this clunky, awkward vehicle is not fun and is disorienting to play. See, if the levels for this were more intense and interesting as opposed to just going from point A to point B to point C, then I wouldn't have minded the gyrocopter. It's a neat little idea, but is ultimately plagued with controls and drab level design. Oh, and I guess now's as good a time as any to mention another flaw in Star Fox Zero. It's multiplayer, or lack thereof. See, there is multiplayer in Zero, but it's very limited, with one player just taking control of the gamepad while another steers. This is not fun. That's all there is to it. There's no point in this mode. I guess they just wanted to advertise that Star Fox Zero had multiplayer but didn't bother to include the multiplayer mode from Assault or 64 that was so fun to play. You would think with the Wii U's greater hardware capabilities, maybe even online Star Fox battles would be a thing. Star Fox 64 3D had local multiplayer battles even. I would be perfectly fine with local battles too, just any multiplayer other than this. It's for these reasons that make me think that Star Fox Zero has been struggling with development issues and was indeed rushed. Something tells me that the crew was a bit too ambitious in what they wanted to accomplish, hence the delays, and had to rush it for a pre-E3 release. It makes me wonder what Zero could have been like with more development time, polish, and care. Could the story have been more intriguing? Would there have been a battle mode with online and all the works? Would the controls be easier to handle? Overall, I'm not a fan of Star Fox Zero, and I don't think it's a good game. Despite it being a Nintendo game and on the Wii U, it's not enjoyable. It tries too hard to be like 64, and instead of paying homage to that beloved game, it tries to copy it without the charm or soul. The story is lackluster and kinda lazy, while the gameplay is ridden with flaws. Sure, the presentation is good, but that's about its only redeeming quality. If you loved 64, Assault, or any other Star Fox game, prepare for disappointment. Even taking away that Star Fox moniker, Zero is a mediocre experience. Here's what I would suggest. If you're a huge fan of Star Fox, then perhaps wait for a price drop or sale, or just get it, I guess, if you really, really want to. However, I would honestly recommend you skip out on Zero entirely. Not only is it not a very entertaining game, it's lacking in content and game length, making it not worth the full retail price. Sure, the first games were all short too, but that doesn't excuse Zero from lacking this much content, especially with the unlockable stuff, which I'm not allowed to discuss. But as always, if you disagree or agree with me, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching and take care. Have a wonderful day and goodbye.